I recently had a viewer reach out to me and asked if I offered coaching services in Warzone. And personally, I don't at the moment. It's something I might consider in the future, but I think it gave me a unique opportunity. I asked this person to send me their gameplay and let me analyze it on YouTube for content in the hopes that it could bring some improvements to their gameplay. So a huge shout out to Corey today. He decided to send me this gameplay in. I really appreciate him doing this today. And I'm going to watch this gameplay live and often rewind through it and talk about the different sequences of things that he does. Things that could be improved, things that he did really well, and talk about his overall execution. This is a really brave thing to do. Having your gameplay watched by a YouTuber is obviously quite a daunting task, and I really appreciate him sending this in. So make sure you hype him up in the comment section down below, folks. And if you want to send me your gameplay, there will be instructions in the description to do that. This is going to be a very openly structured video with very little editing because I really want to break down all of the ins and outs here, so we're going to dive straight on in. We're starting with a risky train play here. Now, trains are high reward, high risk because of the potential loot on them. I think this one is more risk than reward though. And the reason I say that is because this is heading into Orlov. And if I quickly just go back, you can very clearly see that Orlov is on the edge of the circle. There is only one zip line in the top right corner of Orlov. And generally speaking, this is heading to the exterior of the zone that will already be collapsing by the time you move in. So just something to bear in mind when you go for a train play. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but the direction that that train's heading, where it ends up, could very much change the tempo of the rest of your game. I like the use of the heartbeat sensor here. I'm going to be a little bit nitpicky in this gameplay, and one of the things I'm going to say early on is, whilst I understand the need for cash, going for a recon contract whilst being hunted is kind of a double exposure for your position. I don't know whether or not he's going to go and finish the execution on this recon contract, but worth bearing in mind that certain contracts make you more visible than others. I really like certain elements of this gameplay. He's playing a little bit slower. He is slow opening doors, things like that, to reduce his actual audible output. Things like these are just little things that make you less visible and less audible in the game and make you hear other people. And he's in fact just heard footsteps below him. Let's see how this plays out. I really like this. This sequence is really nice. He realized that the person was above him, which is obviously a huge disadvantage. He realized that that person's called in a PA. There is no advantageous position in engaging with that fight. And he's putting layers upon layers of different cover between him and his opponent. Going out in the field is a little bit risky here, but he's peeking the last known position and moving away. This is a really great example of just disengaging from a fight where you don't have the cards in your favor.
Loadout drop headed your way.
The loadout has kind of vaguely landed roughly where he engaged the last guy. So I like this. You know, loadout's worth going for, especially when you've got a redeploy pack on board. 100% worth taking the risk here if you're confident. Little heartbeat sensor too, trying to get as much intel as possible with each given push. I really like the idea of going for the loadie here. Okay, he's just spotted him on the roof. You can just about see. I don't know if he actually saw him, but he briefly appeared on the top corner of that roof. His loadout is probably also in the area. We've got a drone going up. He's just seen him on the loadout. Perfect. Nice and slow gameplay. Goes for the shot. Unlucky. He now knows. Second shot, bit of a miss. Obviously, he's using the explosive sniper, low velocity. Okay, now I would instantly be looking for cover here. That guy is... I like the live mark. Live mark's good. You can see he's just started zipping back into him. He's going to assume that you're going for your loadie here because he's already seen 2 loadout drops. So he knows you're going for this. And he's right there on the roof. He's ready for it. I think in this scenario, we're seeing the first down go down here. I think in this scenario, there's a little bit of lack of game sense, a small bit. You don't notice, I think, the fact that he's decided to land on you. If he's going deep into Orlov, you've got to bear in mind, the circle is collapsing away from where he's heading, which means he is 100% going to play you in this scenario. He's seen you miss a couple sniper shots. He thinks he has all the cards in his favor. And then there are 2 loadout drops. he knows he's fighting you. He's already fought you, so he knows that that other loadie's yours, and he's made the assumption that you're going to go for it. So you've kind of given him all the cards in the equation here. Now, it's a little unlucky. You do have a redeploy pack. It was worth going for the loadie, but I just think when you have a gunfight with somebody, maybe slow it down a little bit, especially if they've decided to zip away, and know for a fact that they're going to re-engage you if they have their own loadout and they're confident that you don't have yours. We're gone forward just ever so slightly here, and I really like what he does here. He marks the last location he got shot from, and then he marks where he thinks there's somebody on the roof because of the portable buy station. I really like making mental notes of where players are. I do this personally in my head, but I like the idea of marking it on the map as well. I think stuff like this is really useful when you think about how to play in and out of a situation. I really like just having these mental lists of threats to consider. He's got a glass break below him. He's heard that. Nice little nade. He's heard him come up the stairs. Nades actually hit him, but it didn't do any damage. There's no plate break. He's jumped down. Perfect. Love that. Absolutely perfectly played. The jump down is obviously one of the largest audible cues in the game, so definitely something to be aware of. You can see that he very audibly will hear this jump down. The nade didn't do a huge amount of damage, but the player was scared. He's heard the mine, he's heard the grenade, he knows he's lost initiative. So capitalizing off that, absolutely perfect. Really good drop shot, absolutely perfectly played. The only thing at the end of the sequence, and this is very nitpicky as me as well, looting this right now when you know somebody has taken the rooftop where that portable buy is, a little bit risky. I would be waiting for that push off the guy on the roof straight away rather than looting, but it's just a minor thing. I reckon if I'm that guy on the roof, I push that because I see a 2v1 fight. He hasn't done that in instance, so this is okay, but it's something to be aware of. You know, you knew he was there already, so I would expect that press to come in straight after this fight is concluded. But really well played.
Enemies dropping into the AO. Be advised, UAV is exiting the AO.
Okay, that last UAV ping has given the enemy dropping in. So you can just about see where he's gone for. It's the same guy, same skin. You know he's re-challing for his loot. I liked backing away from this. That guy had a good head glitch on the trash canister there. Trying to push that without playing your own head glitch or a reliable plate break or 3-plate. Bit of audio to the left here. Somebody splattered next to him. It's a very strange event to happen during the middle of a gunfight. But just rotating away. No need to carry on pressing here. No need to engage with this geezer. You know, you've lost a bit of the initiative by not taking him out early. I like not shooting the LTV here. That's a very 200 IQ play. LTV could literally just hit reverse and crush you. Really well done. You know you've got other threats in the area as well. So firing on that vehicle would be a huge waste of time and would expose you to everybody else. It's around about this point I'd be looking for that last 2k of the equation just to get that loadie on board. I like mortaring the blue building. No reason not to. Doesn't add you to the radar. Adds a bit of chaos to the mix. Now this is a bit of a red flag, right? This is very nitpicky of me. Busting this door on a building this large. It's something I always say to people. Large buildings and large structures like this, if somebody's on the top floor, they've heard you bust this door, but you won't be able to hear that they're there. So when you're in a large building like one of these compounds, play this a little bit more slowly because this alone is an audible cue for anybody in the building and possibly even anybody across the road that you're here. I like this. Very good. Had the initiative by dropping out the window. Lost the initiative. Rotated away. Really well done. This is a really solid way to approach a gunfight. Like, you're really playing your windows well as an individual gunfighter. Like, you knew that he'd slid around the corner. You knew you hadn't done enough damage to justify continuing that challenge, and you zipped away from that. Absolutely perfect. That's what top-level players will do. I also really appreciate here that he's slowed it down a little bit. He's playing crouch walking. He's trying to get some audible cues on his opponent without revealing his own position. That's really nice. I akin this to like slow walking a corner in Valorant or CSGO. Like slow walking or crouch walking is a great way to gain information whilst waiting for somebody else to give you an audio cue. We're seeing a little bit of gameplay planning here. Now, I would just pause this right here. I like pinging the LTV here because I think this is a very risky circle. Now, obviously, we can't see the full extent of the circle, but you can see the central area. And that hillside with all the height in the area, you have to traverse that earlier rather than later. I think you know as a general player that the majority of the circle is going to come out of the city. Most casual players are going to be playing in and out of city. But the bigger problem with this equation is that playing low ground in a final circle is a sure way to lose. You would rather be on the high ground in a bad position than on the low ground in a good position. Because at the end of the day, somebody at the top of that hill is just 100% going to get you every time. Marking the LTV in this equation and using that to traverse it, perfect idea. Now, we do have $7,800 on the board here, so getting your loadout is kind of essential. Having your perks, I think, is quite essential. So I would instantly be looking to buy a loadout drop here. You've got audible slides now on somebody in this building. And again, this is just something I was talking about a little bit earlier about audio queuing in Warzone. Solo is where audio is king because people will use cues. Parachute audio is inherently quite loud sometimes, so he's heard this entire process of you dropping in. You've heard him because for whatever reason he's sliding around the place. So just maybe slowing that down a little bit, walking over towards the buy station, picking up your loadie, and then walking back. You know that that building that you've just left is relatively safe. And playing that safety position and getting your loadie on board, probably the better play in this scenario than committing to the interior of the building. I like this. You know there's a threat in the building. I would not have thrown the loadout there, though. You know there's a threat in the building, which is why you've smoked it, which is the exact same reason why you shouldn't put the drop immediately there. But we did get our loadie on board. These are all just nitpicky things, but you can kind of see, like, that guy's made the press now because he knows that you've smoked it, so he's heard that smoke. He's heard the loadout or seen the smoke. I would have definitely thrown that loadout back towards the building you were previously on, and that would have stopped this entire gameplay equation from happening. Because you're now in a scenario where you're being held at the edge of the circle in this gunfight when you should be focusing position. This is perfect, though. This is great. I mean, way to take a situation that was inherently quite negative and flip it on its head. This is really, really solid. I love people who use utilities and solos. This is great. You've smoked yourself because you think it's inherently clear where you are. Brilliant idea. Adds a bit of obscurity to the situation here, and you've heard him outside the door. Throwing these pies down, absolutely perfect idea as well. Just add some more chaos to the equation. You're giving yourself windows here to flip this gunfight on its head, and that's really, really well played. You're a mouse and keyboard player as well in CQB. Really, really solidly done. You've also just heard that third party. This is what I was talking about earlier. You didn't loot that guy. You've immediately started looking for the third party here. And this is just a perfect, way better way to play this scenario. Now we know there's somebody here. I'm just going to go back to this. Now, you did win this gunfight. And again, as somebody who's coaching this gameplay, this is all very nitpicky of me. Peeking this door, fine. Makes very minimal noise. You then close this door out to your right, which is a huge audible cue. So you've kind of given away that you're on a door, which is why he's peeked this corner. Had he slow walked this corner, he would have had an audible cue on him, on you, and you wouldn't have had an audible cue on him. So you have won this gunfight and you've done well. But if you didn't close that door, you probably wouldn't have either had to take that gunfight or he wouldn't have known that you were here. He would have assumed you maybe had have left. You ultimately got the win, which is what matters. It's just something to be aware of. When you know there's somebody nearby, audible cues are dead giveaways for your location. I would definitely be going for a UAV in this scenario. I like that. Perfect. You've already got self. Getting a UAV on board is really solid. Wow, that's a nightmare. Okay, so we're seeing all of these pings on the radar here. Your path of least resistance in this equation is a wide right swing up the hillside towards your loadout drop. And the bridge also has hard cover towards the top, specifically around the area to the east of the loadout drop. There's a small bit of cover on either side of the bridge. That's probably your best play here. You've got minimal resistance to the south. You've got maximum resistance to your west. And a lot of people will be playing that centralmost compound as well. So you know that's going to be quite messy. So I would be beelining across the rail track here, obviously paying attention to the red ping on the king contract, making sure he doesn't peek you, and just avoiding this entire area that you're currently in. I really I like these pings. I like these little reference points. I do these in my head, but I like that you do this. I like that this is part of your gameplay. Okay, so we've got two things a little bit wrong here. Going towards the action in this later circle, if you're looking to get these final wins, I would be letting the people in this compound thin themselves out. Now, obviously, I can see there's a bit of hesitancy here. You shoot him and then you kind of feel you've lost it and you've smoked it. Unless you know you're going to get the down, because this guy doesn't know you're here. He's just running aimlessly in the open. I would have just guaranteed a down here. If you didn't fire there, you would have just pieced this guy as he walked past you. And instead, you're kind of getting into a slightly more long-winded gunfight. Zone starts collapsing. You're reducing your own margin for error here. PAs come in. We're rotating away. We're now rotating north. So this is kind of what I talk about when I say like tunnel visioning on gunfights and certain people. This entire sequence of gameplay. Now, you obviously want to be heading more towards your southeast, the path of least resistance, like I mentioned earlier. But because you've taken this fight, you're now in a fight with two players. One of those players is called in a PA. That's then forced you north, and you're now ending up in the opposite position of where you really want to be in this gunfight. I understand getting the kills. I understand getting a bit of action on board. I think this is ultimately detrimental to your final circle game planning. I really like how you use smokes to give yourself windows. I think this is a top caliber player level of thinking. I do just think that this entire sequence, though, is like... Not that it's unnecessary, but it could have been avoided or approached better. So that zone's now pulled to that hillside, which we were talking about. You don't want to be on this low ground. You've been forced into this fight now because you took that first engagement, which now means that you're going to be chasing this circle. And this circle is on the low ground of that hillside. And that hillside is without a doubt one of the sort of deathly problems of this circle. It's the biggest threat of this entire endgame sequence is the fact that high ground is now your enemy. Now, when you're put in a bad position, it's always good to do the next best thing, which is exactly what you're doing here, playing towards this coastline. Really solid idea. You're giving yourself the waterway as a potential out. You also know that the majority of people are actually in the compound rather than on the edge of it. So perfect. Keep moving through. This is a really good way to try and regain some of the problems you created earlier in this sequence. And I like the way you've approached this. Right. We've got a bit of an error here. Now, I'm just going to freeze it when you spot this guy. So you've seen a guy up top. You've then seen the LTV chase after him. So that's a fight. You know that those guys are going to be engaging each other, but you've opted to go left, where left has less cover. Right is in the circle and has more cover, including this little gullyway bunker here that you can see in the center of the screen. You would have been better off aiming towards that bunker up there and moving across the rock face bit by bit whilst these guys are busy like ragtag fighting each other. You do have the threat of somebody coming out the compound behind you, but you've got two smokes, whereas smoking up towards these guys is going to be more problematic. There was a guy up there, so you obviously vaguely didn't see this guy because I reckon you would have smoked yourself as per the rest of your gameplay. So that guy's appeared just at the top there, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. So if you had gone right in this equation, this guy doesn't get any shots on you at all. You would have played towards the circle, you would have played towards cover. I like the idea of going for a slightly more obscure route. It's something I talk about quite often. But when your rotation has this many downsides, it's sometimes better to go for the more obvious thing. Oh my gosh. You were super unlucky that the LTV didn't get this guy. Now, look, you know, ultimately being on this hill and getting downed was a little bit kind of a problem in the first place, but the fact that this guy hasn't killed him in the LTV is so unlucky. You should have really been able to get this self off. So that's very, very unlucky. So I think it's just worth assessing that this entire sequence of gameplay came from a couple of things. It came from taking this fight at the bottom here. And the one thing that I've noticed throughout this entire solos gameplay is that there are small little things that you do that don't necessarily make you a bad player or make you do bad things, but they amount to things. So earlier in this sequence, you throw the loadout drop next to your building, which means you end up taking a fight on the exterior of the building, which is what you end up doing here. And this slows you down against the circle. So again, you're chasing the circle, you're not playing positioning in these final circles, you're playing what's in front of you because a problem's been created. And then later on in this sequence, you've seen all of these pings, you know where everybody is, and you opt to go towards the trouble rather than your path of least resistance, which is to the southeast here, which would allow you to get into the high ground fairly uncontested. So you've decided to play through to the circle, and if you opt to play that way, you're going to have these fights again. And going in that general direction has forced you into these fights. You get into this fight here, which again is another slowdown scenario, and this precision airstrike in particular that's about to come in forces you to the north side, which is into the path of more resistance. So again, your gameplay has ultimately been slowed down by a few minor decisions, which although you win all of these scenarios, and although you don't get killed by this guy, you outplay the guy on the loadout drop, and you win the majority of your gunfights in this equation. Because of the decision making in these final circles, you're actually putting yourself on the back foot as opposed to the front foot. So this airstrike, you get this win, you get this kill, perfect. Airstrike forces you north. So you end up north, you end up on the side of the circle that you probably don't want to be on because you have to transverse this hill coming up ahead of you. You do a really good job of skirting the edge here. And then at the very end, you decide to go again for the path of most resistance, which is left. If you had a full gas mask, I would have understood this play, but you didn't. If you go to the right, you're in hard cover, and that's how you end up dying. So although you haven't really got anything wrong with your fundamentals, I think your gunfights are great. I really like the way you use smoke grenades, and I really like the way that you approach certain situations. You're aware of your audio cues, you use your utilities, you use the things in buildings. I think the thing that lets you down here is just a little bit of late game planning. This obviously to the south looks like a super, super risky play. When you've got this UAV come in, you start looking around. This to the south obviously looks like a super risky play because it's very open. But I think a player of your stature and somebody who knows how to use smoke grenades and use movement, because you clearly can, I'd make that risky play because you're going to get up on that hillside far easier than the decision you ended up making. So this is just all little micro niches, little, nitpicking things that I'm pulling out about your gameplay for otherwise very sound gameplay. I think the way you approach fights, the way you back away from fights, the way you create windows in fights, the way you use your utilities, all of these are like really well nailed and oiled parts of your gameplay. It was just that final circle planning that just let you down in this sequence. But I still think that this is like a high caliber player. And I think you've done like a phenomenal job of getting through most of this game without even your loadout, which is really big to see. So folks, that's about it for this gameplay analysis. A real shout out to Corey for sending this in. It's worth mentioning that a lot of the things that I've picked apart about his gameplay are really little things that can add up to a really momentous difference to the overall flow of his game. But I was really impressed with what I saw. I think I saw a player who was pre-planning a lot, using his surroundings a lot, and was definitely aware of the solo gameplay around him. And again, if you'd like to send your gameplay in, there are instructions down below if you want to in the description to explain how you could do that. But make sure you hype up Corey in the comment section below. I think he did a phenomenal job. He got really unlucky with some of those last rotations that he could have managed better. But for the most part, I think this was a really solid solo gameplay, and he got late into circle and very easily could have put himself in a winning position. So again, a huge shout out to Corey for sending this in. Make sure you guys hype him up in the comments, and I'll catch you again in the next one.